St. Louis Children's Hospital.
And do you see patients there?
Yes.
How long have you been a geneticist?
I completed my fellowship training in July of 1989.
Can you tell the jury the overall training, education, and experience you have?
Yes, so I went to college at Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts. Then I went to medical school at the University of Florida in Gainesville, Florida. Then I went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison for my pediatrics training and 1 year of pathology. And then I went to the NIH for a medical genetics fellowship.
And you indicated you had completed that fellowship some time ago.
Yes.
What hospital systems have you worked in?
I worked at Cardinal Glennon Children's Hospital and then St. Louis Children's Hospital.
And as part of being a medical doctor, do you have to undergo continuing education and things like that?
Yes.
And is your area of expertise, is that considered a specialized training?
Yes.
Did you ever have a patient by the name of Christian Ferguson?
Yes, I did.
And when did Christian Ferguson become your patient?
When he was 3 days old.
Was this at Cardinal Glennon Children's Hospital or someplace else?
Cardinal Glennon.
So you were working with Christian Ferguson from the time he was born, basically?
Yes.
Do you know who Dawan Ferguson is?
Yes, I do.
Do you know who Theda Wilson at the time is?
Yes.
Why was it that Christian Ferguson came to be in your care?
Well, at 3 days of age, he became critically ill. He was born over at St. Mary's Hospital and developed neurological symptoms at 2 to 3 days of age. And then he was transferred to the neonatal intensive care unit at Cardinal Glennon. And then I was called to see him because he had severely elevated ammonia level in the blood.
So you get called in, and is it your job to assess what may or may not be wrong with Christian?
Yes, because when you have a newborn with a high ammonia level, there's a high chance that there's an inborn error of metabolism causing that.
What does that mean?
That means that there's potentially an enzyme defect, a genetic disorder involving metabolism of protein and causing the ammonia level to go extremely high. And so then we need to do additional specialized testing to determine what the cause is.
And were you able to determine what the cause was?
Yes, I was.
And what was that cause?
Citrullinemia type 1. Can
you explain to the jury how a child develops or suffers from citrullinemia?
It's what we call an autosomal recessive disorder. So both parents are carriers for that condition. And then the baby will inherit 2 copies of the abnormal gene and be affected by the condition.
Is this a common disease or a rare disease?
It's rare.
Approximately how rare?
Somewhere between 1 in 60,000 to 1 in 200,000 newborns.
And you indicated a moment ago both parents have to be a carrier and the child has to receive both of those abnormal genes from both parents.
Correct.
And that's not a common occurrence, correct?
No, it's rare.
Can you describe to the jury what citrullinemia means as it relates to the patient?
So it's a defect in an enzyme called argininosuccinate synthetase deficiency, which means that he is unable to convert citrulline to arginine in what's known as the urea cycle. So that's an enzymatic pathway in the body that helps metabolize ammonia, which is toxic to the body if it builds up in body fluids and tissues. So it can cause the ammonia level to go up very high in the body because there's a block in that pathway, and he's unable to make arginine and then cannot complete the urea cycle process to get rid of the ammonia through the urine via urea.
Are there medications that can counteract this disease?
Yes, there are medications that we can use. When the ammonia is very high, we often do hemodialysis or hemofiltration to bring the ammonia level down rapidly.
And what does that mean?
That means that large bore IV catheters are placed into the vessels, and the baby is put on hemodialysis like you would do for somebody that has kidney failure, for example. Same idea. but that helps get rid of the ammonia rapidly, and then after that, we would start medications to keep the ammonia down.
So when a patient with citrullinemia is at home, do they take regular medication to keep those ammonia levels down?
Yes, so there's IV forms of the medication we can give in the hospital, but then once that ammonia level is down and the condition is under control, then we start oral medications.
But you had mentioned earlier that if there is some sort of high ammonia level, it's better to do that something dialysis word you mentioned earlier, correct?
Hemodialysis or hemofiltration, yes.
Okay. And because that lowers those levels rapidly.
Right.
And what is the risk of keeping those levels high for an extended period of time?
The higher the level is and the longer that it stays high, there's brain damage. So the brain can swell. There can be neurological symptoms like seizures and abnormal movements, and that can progress to brain swelling and then ultimately death.
If a patient has citrullinemia and they receive the medications, I guess let me rephrase it this way. Is it possible to manage a patient with citrullinemia without risk of these constant hyperammonemic states?
Yes, it is. There's also a special diet that needs to be maintained, which was low protein intake in the diet with high carbohydrates and high fats, with essential amino acid supplements, plus taking the medications. There's what we call ammonia scavenger medications that help get rid of the excess ammonia in the body, and then these patients also require arginine supplement because their body cannot make arginine.
Do you work with dietitians to ensure that there is an appropriate dietary program in place?
Yes, we have metabolic dietitians that are specifically trained in how to take care of these patients that have rare metabolic disorders.
And like you said earlier, if you abide by the medications and the diet, citrullinemia can be managed.
It can be managed, yes.
When you met with Dawan Ferguson and Theta, were they instructed on what to look out for if Christian was entering or at risk of entering into one of those hyperammonemic states?
Yes, on many occasions.
And can you describe to the jury the instructions they received or what they were told to look out for?
Things to look out for would be lethargy, decreased appetite, decreased oral intake of formula and medications, vomiting, if the child is able to walk, an inability to walk or staggering gait, changes in mental status, those types of things could all indicate elevated ammonia.
What about vomiting?
Vomiting, yes.
What about moaning?
If the child were going into a coma-like state, yes, there could be moaning.
And if they're going into a coma-like state, would that mean that they're into already one of those high ammonia level states?
Likely, yes.
Now, I understand that Christian, on I believe his third day of life, had suffered from elevated ammonia levels. That is what triggered your involvement, correct?
That's correct.
Oh, I'm sorry. It is leading, but I think it's just recapping, so I'll overrule it. You may want to ask again.
Thank you. That's what triggered your involvement, right?
Yes, I was called by the neonatologist to come see him because he had neurological symptoms, leading them to check an ammonia level, and when it was elevated, they called genetics.
And there were, or I'll rephrase, were there any effects that had on Christian because of that third day event?
Yes, when he came over from St. Mary's, he was having some seizure activity. He was obtunded. He was in a coma, essentially, had dilated pupils. So he was critically ill at that time.
But prior to that, the parents were not aware that he had citrullinemia.
No, nobody would know about that. The babies with this appear completely normal at birth, and then when they start consuming formula or breast milk containing protein, it takes a couple days, and then they will start to develop symptoms.
Now, even though this happened to Christian and he underwent that first hyperammonemic state, was he able to, in childhood, if you know, walk, talk, move around, do things like that?
Yes.
Was he able to grow and develop?
Yes. He did have some developmental delays in the area of speech and language development in particular, and we did have him evaluated by the Knights of Columbus Developmental Center at Cardinal Glennon.
And so does that mean he would maybe need specialized education or things of that nature?
Yes, he needed therapy services when he was young, and then he would require special education once he got to school.
But he was able to use the restroom on his own?
Yes, he was toilet trained.
He was able to walk?
Yes.
Able to talk?
Yes.
Was he able to consume foods by his mouth?
Yes.
Did he require any sort of feeding tube?
No. Not at that time.
Dr. Grange, were you still treating Christian Ferguson in January of 2001?
Yes.
Did you become aware that something had happened to Christian on January 16th of 2001?
Yes, he came to the emergency department at Cardinal Glennon.
What time did he come to the emergency department?
I believe he arrived approximately at noon that day.
Did you speak with the defendant about what had happened to Christian?
Yes, I did.
And did you create notes of those interactions?
Yes.
Okay. And have you reviewed those notes just to refresh your memory here today?
Yes, I have.
What, if anything, did Dawan Ferguson tell you had happened to Christian in the day or two leading up to that hospitalization?
May I look at my notes?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So I was told that people in the family were having an illness associated with vomiting and other gastrointestinal symptoms. I was told, according to my note, that Christian was taking all of his medications and ate normally the day before that, which would have been January 15th. But that last evening, meaning the evening of the 15th, he had complained of abdominal pain before going to bed. And then is that what you want so far? Or?
Did he indicate whether or not he checked on Christian at all?
He said he put him to bed and decided to keep him home from school to let him sleep. And he went to check on him at 11:15 in the morning on the 16th.
11:15 in the morning on the 16th.
That's what I wrote in my note, yes.
Is there any record of him calling you or attempting to make contact with you that day?
Yes, I wrote in my note that Father called me, and I don't know exactly what time, and then brought Christian to the emergency department at Cardinal Glennon.
Was there anything in the records or anything from your independent recollection where you told him to wait or wait to hear from you or anything like that?
Not that I recall.
Abdominal pain and things like that, if a child is feeling sick. Was Dawan Ferguson instructed by you to contact you or the hospital to check on whether or not that would need to be a hospital visit?
Yes, we wanted the parents to call us and let us know if the child was not doing well so we could decide what plan of action we should take.
Were they instructed by you in the hospital to not wait until the next day to see if it got worse?
In general, yes, we wanted them to bring him in as soon as possible if there was any concern about the developing illness.
And would this have been any sort of situation where it was, let's just wait several hours to hear from Dr. Grange, or would you have said, take him in and we'll figure it out from there?
Hold on a second.
Judge, I'm going to object to this question. It's speculative in nature.
Yeah, I'll sustain the objection. I think if you have something more concrete to ask her what occurred.
Sure, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Let's talk about what all happened to Christian on January 16th of 2001 and leading into the next weeks and months. Can you tell the jury about that?
Well, when he arrived at the emergency department that day, he could not be aroused. He was obtunded. He had no response to pain and no spontaneous movements.
So I'm going to stop you right there.
Yes.
By the time Christian came to the hospital around noon, he could not be aroused?
No, and my note indicates that when Dawan went to wake him up at 11:15, he had just vomited in bed and could not be aroused at that time.
Well, keep going.
Okay. So when he arrived at the emergency department, the initial ammonia was 632.
Is that considered high?
That's extremely high. The normal would be up to about 40 or 50. So then he also began having seizures in the emergency department and was given medications, 2 different medications to stop the seizure activity. He was started on IV fluids. He was given the IV medications that we use during critical illnesses, which include sodium benzoate and sodium phenylacetate and arginine, all through an IV. He needed to be intubated, put on a ventilator, and then he was transferred to the pediatric intensive.
Approximately how often did you want to have clinical visits with Christian?
At that age, about every 3 months. When he was younger, when he was an infant, we saw him much more often, maybe even every week or 2, and then spaced out to every month. As he got older, we'd like to see him every 3 months, roughly.
In 2002 and 2003, were you seeing Christian Ferguson every 2 to 3 months?
No. Let me get my notes.
You were not?
No, by that time I had moved over to St. Louis Children's Hospital.
And did Christian, his care follow you there?
His care followed me. After I left Cardinal Glennon, he was admitted there a few times while he was still at Rankin, Jordan. And then in...
And just so we're clear, that's still within that January to June of 2001 overall hospital. So at some times you would go from Rankin and back.
He had to go back to Cardinal Glennon, I believe, 3 times.
Okay.
Once was related to an infection of an indwelling catheter that he had.
Okay. So let's talk about after that stay.
Okay. Then on July 5th of 2001, so he was back with his father at that time, is my understanding, according to the review of my records. He went to Cardinal Glennon with lethargy and a high ammonia level, and because I was no longer at Cardinal Glennon, they transferred him over to St. Louis Children's Hospital for continuing management.
And this is still in that July of 2001 time period?
July 2000, yes, July 2001.
Okay. When was the next time you saw Christian?
Then he came back for a follow-up visit on July 25th to see me in clinic after he had recovered from that illness.
We're still talking about the year 2001?
2001,
Okay.
right.
Did you see him anymore in 2001?
He came back on November 15th, 2001 for another visit.
So from July till November, you didn't see him?
Right, it was about 3.5 months.
Okay. When was the next time you saw Christian after that November of 01 time period?
Then he came in on February 13th, 2002.
Okay. Next time?
Then he got admitted to the hospital from May 6th to May 9th of 2002 for an illness. So we saw him then, but it was in the hospital, not in the clinic.
All right. So we have May 6th to the 9th of 2002.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
When was the last time you saw Christian after that?
I saw him on March 6th, 2003.
So from May 6th of 2002, you did not see Christian until March 6th of 2003,
Correct.
almost an entire year later.
10 months, yes.
And he's supposed to be seen by you every 3 to 4?
Yes.
Were letters or phone calls made by the hospital to try to schedule follow-up appointments?
Yes, he had an appointment on June 20th, 2002, after that hospitalization in May, but he did not come to the appointment. And then we sent a reminder letter on June 24th to reschedule the appointment.
Was it ever rescheduled?
No.
Let's talk about that March 6th of 2003. Who brought Christian to the hospital?
Kim Nero, his home nurse.
Was Dawan Ferguson present?
No.
Is that unusual?
Objection relevance.
Overruled. You may answer, ma'am.
Well, some of the earlier visits, Dawan had come with one of the home nurses. There was another visit where he just, let's see here. The February 13th, 2002 visit, he just came with the home nurse as well. So, yes, I mean, many times one of the parents will come with the home nurse, so the home nurse can listen to the discussion and the plan for care. So we obviously want the parent to be there.
But that March 6th, 2003, Dawan was not there.
No.
Can you tell the jury about why you insisted on that March 6th, 2003 visit?
On December 2nd, 2002, Kim Nero, the nurse, called our office and requested refills for Tristan's medications. And we did that for 3 months to make sure that he wouldn't run out of the medications, but she was told that Christian was very overdue for an appointment and needed to be seen. And then that's when they made the appointment, but we didn't actually see him until March. There were some more phone calls in between Kim Nero and our dietitian as well.
Okay. So he was very overdue, so you insisted on him coming before you guys would refill prescriptions any further?
Right. We gave him a 3-month supply, but said you need to bring him in because typically we need to see a patient once a year to refill any prescription.
And that is on a more standard, healthier patient, not someone like Christian?
Right. I'm just saying in general, legally, we're supposed to see a patient, any patient, once a year in order to keep refilling their medications.
Can you describe to the jury how Christian's weight and height developed or changed from 2001, from November 15th, 2001 to June 6th of 2003?
On November 15th, his weight was 26.2 kilograms, which is about 57 pounds. When we saw him on March 6th, he was 23 kilograms, which is about 50 pounds.
So he had dropped approximately 7 pounds in that 2-year period?
It was less than 2 years, but yes.
What, if you know, what percentile was Christian on the growth chart?
On March 6th,
Yes.
3rd percentile.
Did you have concerns about, well, let's talk about Christian's height. In those 2-year periods, did Christian grow at all?
Well, the height that we marked on March 6th was below the 3rd percentile. So he had been on the 3rd percentile and he'd fallen below the 3rd percentile.
So he shrunk?
No, he didn't shrink. He just didn't grow.
Okay, so he stayed the exact same height?
Yes, according to my notes here, yes.
So let's talk about a child between the ages of 7 and 9 dropping 7 pounds and not growing at all in height. Is that concerning to you?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury why?
Well, we expect children to grow along their own growth chart appropriately. We don't want them to lose weight or just stop growing in height. That's not normal. Even though Christian was always shorter for his age, we still wanted him to continue growing along his own percentile where he had been.
And children between the ages of 7, 8, 9 typically grow quite a bit during those years, correct?
Objection, speculation, Judge.
She's a doctor that studies growth charts. I don't believe it's speculation. It's within her expertise.
Yeah, the doctor's credentials are outstanding and have been set before the jury. She's in a position to be able to answer a question like this. It doesn't call for speculation, actually calls for hypothesis based on her extensive experience and education, so the objection's overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you expect them to grow?
Yes.
Even children with citrullinemia are expected to grow along their own growth chart, correct?
Yes.
Did you raise concerns to Dawan about the importance of refilling prescriptions timely?
Yes, on occasion.
Did you instruct him of the importance and necessity of all of those medications?
Yes, I think he was well aware of that.
Were several of those medications that he was prescribed life-sustaining medications?
Yes.
Did they counteract the levels of ammonia?
Yes.
And without those medications, those ammonia levels would rise?
Yes, we would expect them to rise.
After March of 2003, did you ever have any more visits with Christian Ferguson?
No.
Did your hospital try contacting the Ferguson household for follow-up visits?
My notes indicate that Nancy Brody, the dietitian, spoke with Kim Nero again, or tried to speak with her in April and May, and was not able to get a hold of anybody.
Did she also try to call the Ferguson household and left messages?
Yes, that was her. That she said that in her notes. Yes.
And did those go unanswered?
Yes.
Dr. Grange, if a patient is experiencing those symptoms, that would mean he was entering into a hyperammonemic crisis. Would your hospital protocol have been to wait and take him in themselves or to call 911?
If he were obtunded, unable to be aroused, or showing any severe neurological symptoms like that, we would want the family to just call 911.
And did you instruct the parents of Christian Ferguson of those concerns and those necessities?
I believe they knew that over the many years that I followed him.
If Christian Ferguson had been up all night vomiting and he did not receive medical hospital intervention, how long would he be able to survive?
Without medications or nutrition or fluids, maybe 48 hours to 72 hours at the most.
If Christian Ferguson did not have his G-tube in his stomach and was moaning and his eyes were rolling in the back of his head, would that be indicative of him entering into one of those hyperammonemic states?
Yes, I would be highly suspicious that that was happening, yes.
And if those factors were present, how long would Christian Ferguson be able to survive without hospital or medical intervention?
Maybe 24 hours.
No further questions.
All right, thank you. Cross-examination.
Thank you, Judge.
You may proceed when you're ready.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So, Dr. Grange, with your experience and training that you talked about on direct, you're more of an authority on citrullinemia than you would say parents, patients, or parents, nurses, or pharmacists. Is that fair to say?
Yes,
And the condition of citrullinemia, it is quite rare.
yes.
And Christian had the severe forms. I think there's type 1 and type 2.
No, type 2 is actually a different genetic
Oh.
condition with a different gene involved.
Okay.
But within type 1, there is a range of severity. And Christian had what we call classic citrullinemia type 1, which presents as a newborn with a severe presentation.
And as you had testified, this is a disease to manage the ammonia in the body, correct? Is that right?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So with the disease, the ammonia levels can rise in the body, which can then cause, as we said, certain symptoms
Yes,
of citrullinemia. Okay. And when you're given the medications to manage citrullinemia, the ammonia that can build up in the body passes through the urine? Is that?
yes. Well, yes, that's true. The ammonia scavengers, like the sodium phenylbutyrate, which is the oral form of the medication that he was on, helps conjugate the excess ammonia, and that's excreted into the urine. And then the arginine that he is given helps drive the urea cycle around, past the blockage, and then more of the ammonia is excreted in the urine in the form of urea.
And in your training and experience with treating patients with citrullinemia, is their urine sometimes a bit more stronger or potent because of that?
The medication, particularly the sodium phenylbutyrate, has a very bad smell and taste,
Okay.
so that could cause an unusual odor, yes.
And again, in your experience treating patients with citrullinemia, when they're taking those types of medications, have you ever seen where a patient might have an odor because of the medications that they're taking?
Yes,
Now, with citrullinemia, it is possible to live to adulthood. Is that correct?
it is possible,
Okay. But the overall life expectancy is lower than normal.
yes.
And over your career, you've treated a total, is it 8 citrullinemia patients?
Yes, there have been 8 patients that I'm either primarily or secondarily involved with, yes, in their care, yes.
And with treating citrullinemia, I think you testified on direct, there's a regimen of medications and the special diet that you had talked about.
Correct.
Now, symptoms of citrullinemia, as you said, could be vomiting and anorexia.
If their ammonia is high, they often lose their appetite and are unable to, or not interested in eating. They would have decreased oral intake of formula or foods. Yes, that could happen.
Which can lead to weight loss.
It could, yes.
And were you, with your treatment with Christian, aware that he had pica, where he put things in his mouth?
My clinic note indicated that he would mouth objects,
Okay.
but I'm not aware that he ate or swallowed any of those things.
And in your experience also dealing with patients with citrullinemia, weight loss in the child doesn't necessarily mean that the caregiver did anything wrong. There could be other reasons as well, correct?
Is that a statement or
I'm
a
asking.
question?
No, it's a question. I can ask it again.
Could you rephrase
Yeah.
it, please?
In your experience treating patients with citrullinemia, if a child loses weight, that doesn't necessarily mean that the caregiver did something wrong.
Not necessarily. We want to know more about the situation. Was there vomiting, diarrhea, intolerance of the formula that the child was being given, another illness happening, or some other medical condition unrelated to citrullinemia that would cause them not to be able to gain weight?
And going to January of 2001, where Christian was sick. The coma then led to the disability. Is
Yes.
that correct? Okay. And I believe you had testified, to your knowledge, the information you were given is that there was a virus in the family, I guess a stomach virus at time.
We were told that people in the household were having vomiting and other gastrointestinal symptoms.
Okay.
Yes.
Which is a stomach virus?
Could be.
Okay. And you, based on that information, you had believed that the viral infection could have caused that hyperammonemia.
That could have triggered.
Yeah.
That could have triggered his illness with the abdominal pain and then vomiting. Yes, that could have started the illness.
Okay. And based on that information that you received about what was going on at the house at that time, you didn't blame Dawan for that incident.
Objection, Your Honor, invades the province of the jury.
Yeah, that'll be sustained.
When Dawan brought Christian in for that incident in January of 2001, you didn't call the police or protective services on Dawan, correct?
I did not know.
Okay. And you and other hospital staff are mandated reporters, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, talking a bit about the life-sustaining medication, again, in your training and experience dealing with this disease, if a child goes a few days without the correct amount of the life-sustaining medication or too little of it, will they have a hypoammonemic episode?
Potentially, yes.
So because of that, a child with citrullinemia can't go weeks without the proper amount of life-sustaining medication.
That's correct.
Okay. And fair to say months?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right.
They would need to be hospitalized if something happened. Well, they can't go, I'm just saying.
Could you rephrase the question? How long would they, are you saying they would be without the medications? Months? I don't think they would be alive if they went months without the medication.
Okay. So let's talk about the G-tube. The G-tube is a way to get in nutrition and medication. Is that correct, in the body?
That's correct.
And even after the G-tube was put in, Christian was able to eat orally as well.
Yes, he was allowed to eat by mouth.
And it is possible for a G-tube to come out and be replaced.
Yes, that happens sometimes.
And you've seen it happen where children have pulled out the G-tube before?
Sometimes a child can pull it out. Yes, they could grab onto it and pull it out. That could happen.
And a child with a G-tube, with an experienced caregiver, they can put it back in.
They can be trained on how to put in a new tube, yes.
And caregivers or parents can easily do that at home if they're trained, as you said.
If they're trained, but if there's any difficulty getting it back in, they have to come to the emergency department and have it reinserted.
Okay. And G-tubes are replaced as needed. Is that right?
Generally, yes.
Okay.
You know, they eventually the plastic starts to corrode or the balloon doesn't work anymore and it needs to be changed.
And if, like you said, the plastic is cracked, the G-tube can be taken out, replaced, and then thrown in the trash.
Yes.
Okay. So pulling out a G-tube does not automatically result in death.
No.
And I believe when we were talking about needs to be put back in sooner rather than later, we're talking about the stoma.
Yes, the opening in the abdominal wall is called the stoma.
And the stoma can close quickly. Is that correct?
It can begin closing within a matter of hours.
Okay. So as you had testified about warning signs of hyperammonemia, it's sleepiness, lethargy, vomiting, staggering, and confusion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
And there were times when Dawan would call and let the staff know he's...
Objection, hearsay.
That'll be sustained.
There were times when Dawan, I guess, would notice those signs in Christian and bring him to the hospital.
Is that,
Same
that's a
objection, Your Honor.
statement, or?
Hold on a second, ma'am. That'll be, why don't you approach? All right, just hang on 1 second, please.
Mhm.
Very good. All right, you may continue.
Thank you. Dr. Grange, as you said, you treated Christian from an infant from Cardinal Glennon over to Children's Hospital. In the times of your treatment with Christian, from the notes that you had, would there be times when Dawan would call to let you know he's bringing Christian to the hospital?
Yes, well, he would call and let us know what was going wrong, and, you know, would decide, yes, he needs to come to the hospital, or no, we can try this or that at home, you know, so it didn't always result in a trip to the hospital.
Okay. And if it was a situation where you asked for Dawan to bring Christian in, would you alert the emergency room department so they could get certain things set up because Christian was coming in?
We would, yes, we like to notify the emergency department that he's coming. He was well known to the emergency department at Cardinal Glennon because of many visits there. So generally for any patient, if I know the patient is coming to the emergency department, I like to call and alert them, particularly if it's somebody that I don't want to sit in the waiting room a long time or something like that. So yes.
Okay.
But there wasn't anything we had to get set up, really.
Well, I know with Christian, when he had to come in, if you had to take his blood, did you have to put it on ice?
For pneumonia level, there's a special procedure that needs to be followed to make sure that we get an accurate measurement of the ammonia, yes.
Okay. And also for treating someone like Christian for the ER, wasn't there a special type of IV or something like that you would use?
Not really special type of IV. We had recommendations for IV, the type of IV fluids that should be used, yes.
Okay. For a patient like Christian?
Yes.
Okay. Nothing further.
All right, thank you. Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Hi, Dr. Grange.
Hi.
Defense counsel just asked you about the January 16th, 2001 incident where she referenced that there was a virus going around in the family. Do you remember her asking you about that?
Yes,
Okay. However, when you guys ran your tests on Christian, there was no signs of any illness in him, correct?
I don't recall that.
Now, she also indicated and asked you a question about weight loss doesn't mean that Dawan did anything wrong. It could be from other things, correct?
Objection, Judge, that's not what I asked. I said caregiver.
Sorry, the caregiver. I'll
Hold on a
rephrase.
second. I'll sustain the objection. Why don't you restate your question, please?
She asked you about how weight loss doesn't necessarily mean the caregiver did anything wrong, and she gave other reasons as to why. Do you remember her talking to you about that?
Yes,
However, in that last visit, when weight loss was a concern, did your hospital run a metabolic panel?
yes, we did laboratory studies that day.
And were there any issues or illnesses or things on that metabolic panel that would have explained away that weight loss?
Let me just get my notes, please, for a second. Hold on a second. We did the serum amino acid analysis, which was a standard test that we would do to look at the amino acid levels in the blood. And they were not showing, they were showing elevated citrulline, which was normal for him, which would be like that all the time. Other markers of more prolonged hyperammonemia, like an elevated glutamine level, was not there. The glutamine was in the normal range.
So nothing that would have explained that weight loss for something other than not getting his food.
Well, we also did like a CBC with diff to look at blood counts. We did a comprehensive metabolic panel to check for liver problems, electrolyte abnormalities, or any sign of kidney dysfunction. Those came out normal.
And you had mentioned earlier about how a child could have a decreased appetite and therefore would not want to take in oral food. Do you remember her talking to you about that?
Yes,
However, Christian had a G-tube, which is how he received most of his nutrition, correct?
that's correct.
If there were nurses or somebody that was providing medication and nutrition for about 40 hours a week, and we don't know what's happening the rest, but he is receiving medication during that time period, would that be enough for Christian to essentially limp along without needing hospital stays?
Judge, I'm going to object. This is a speculative in nature question.
Well, I'm going to, I'll sustain the objection, maybe restate your question as to degree of medical certainty in those terms, please.
Yes, Your Honor. If a patient like Christian was receiving the proper medication and nutrition for at least 40 hours a week, but not necessarily for the rest of it, in your medical opinion, would it be possible for him to be able to keep going, but the ammonia levels would not necessarily rise to the degree that it would require a hospital stay?
That's possible, yes.
And one last question. In the days and weeks after Christian was reported missing, did anybody contact you about him being admitted to any hospitals or doctors or anything like that?
No.
And if Christian Ferguson had been presented to a hospital, would it have been common practice for them to notify his geneticist?
Yes, if they knew who it was, yes.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Any recross?
No.
No. A witness may be released, Ms. Fletcher?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, doctor. You may step down. Have a good day. Right, ladies and gentlemen, why don't we just take a short break? Before you begin, the court again reminds you of what you were told at the first recess of the court. Until you retire to consider your verdict, you must not discuss this case among yourselves or with others, or permit anyone to discuss it at your hearing. You should not form or express any opinion about the case until it is finally given to you to decide. Do not do any research or investigation on your own about any matter regarding this case or anyone involved in the trial. Do not communicate with others about the case by any means. And then finally, do not read, view, or listen to any newspaper, radio, electronic communication from the internet, or television report of the trial. And I assume it goes without saying you've already disabled those news alerts. So have a good break. We'll get you back as soon as possible. Thank you.
All right, please.
All right, thank you. All may be seated. All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Ms. Schlesinger, the state may call its next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. State calls Santana Contreras.
All right, thank you. Good morning, ma'am. Welcome. You just come right up here for me, please. Raise your right hand when you get up here. I'll swear you, okay? You do solemnly swear that the information you're about to provide will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, self you got. I'm sorry. All right, thank you. Go ahead and have a seat here in the witness chair. Make yourself comfortable. Once you're settled in, if you just spell your name for my report, please.
Santanna.
All right. Do you need some water or anything, ma'am? No. All right. If you would just scoot up to make sure the microphone, we can hear you clearly, and Ms. Schlesinger, you can begin when you believe you are ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Contreras.
Hello.
Safe to say you're nervous about being here today?
Yes.
All right, if you need to take a break at all, just let me know, okay?
Hi.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Santana Contreras,
And what state do you currently live in?
Arizona.
Ma'am, if you would, could you maybe scoot up and just speak up a little bit for us? I'm having trouble hearing you.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Thank you, ma'am. All right, you may continue.
Thank you. At some point, did you live in St. Louis, Missouri?
Yes.
And I want to draw your attention back to 2004. Do you know somebody by the name Dawan Ferguson?
Yes.
And do you know somebody by the name Monica Ferguson?
Yes.
How did you know Monica Ferguson?
I worked with her at the Avenue store.
And what is the Avenue?
It's a plus-size women's store.
And where is it located?
Clock Tower Plaza.
And what was your connection to Monica at the Avenue? You said you worked together. Were you coworkers or something else?
She was my assistant manager.
And was there anyone else that worked at the store as well?
Sonia,
And who was Sonia?
the manager.
At some point, did you become friends with Monica?
Not right off, but we did.
Eventually, you became friends.
Yes.
How long did you work at the Avenue?
For some months.
And did you ever see Dawan Ferguson at
Yeah.
the Avenue?
Yes.
What would he be doing there?
Sometimes in the parking lot, sometimes walking around.
When he was inside the store, what would he be doing?
Walking around.
Was he buying anything?
No.
Was he talking to anyone?
No.
And other times you said he would be in the parking lot?
Yes.
Did you go by a different name at that time?
Yes.
What was your name at that time?
Cherie Douglas.
And at some point, did you have your name changed?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury a little bit about what it changed to Santana Contreras then?
Yes.
When your relationship with Monica went from coworkers to friends, did you see her outside of work ever?
Yes.
Did you go out to drinks? Did you go to each other's homes? Or can you tell the jury a little bit about that?
I went out once with them, and then they came to my home a couple times.
When you went out to them, was this to a bar, a restaurant, or something else?
It was to the bar when we went out.
At any point, did Dawan and Monica approach you about any sort of relationship status?
Objection, Judge, based on defense pretrial motions.
Right, and that will be overruled. Your objection can run throughout the questioning.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you. You may, once you re-ask the question.
At some point, did Dawan and Monica approach you about some sort of relationship status?
Monica did.
Monica did?
Yes.
And what was the purpose of that relationship?
To become like a part of their relationship.
Like a poly relationship?
Yes.
When you were out to drinks with Monica and Dawan, did you talk to both of them?
More her than him.
Was he present and around?
Yeah.
At some point, you had mentioned earlier that they would come to your house. Why would Monica come to your house at certain points?
To pick up clothing.
And is this in relation to the avenue?
Yes.
Okay. So would you take clothes from the store to your house and she would pick them up or something else?
Yes.
Okay. At some point, did you, well, let me ask you this. When you met Monica and Dawan Ferguson, did you at that point make the connection to what had previously been reported on the news as it related to Christian Ferguson?
No.
Okay. Had you heard about the disappearance of Christian Ferguson?
When it first happened.
And was that from the news or something else?
I think it was the news or word of mouth. I don't remember.
At some point, did you make the connection between Christian Ferguson and Monica and Dawan Ferguson?
At some point, but it wasn't on my own.
Sorry?
It wasn't on my own, but at some point I did.
And what do you mean by that?
When it was kind of like I didn't know anybody's last name, but as we got to know each other and conversation started, then I kind of knew what the conversation with them was. I kind of put two and two together.
Okay. And at that point, was it just that Christian Ferguson had been reported missing?
No.
Okay, was it something else?
Well, at that time I didn't know it was Christian Ferguson. I just knew it was a boy
Okay.
or a stepson of Monica's.
So you knew a stepson of Monica's was missing.
Yes.
Okay. At some point, did you talk with Monica and or Dawan about Christian?
Yes. Oh, well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was this conversation first with Monica or with Dawan?
Monica.
Can you tell the jury how the conversation with Monica led to talking about Christian?
Basically, she would, make comments. I still didn't know it was Christian. She would make comments about having to give, being responsible for a kid's medicine or whatever the case may be, and she felt that she wasn't responsible for that and that he should be responsible. And it was kind of like a back and forth.
So she felt that she shouldn't be responsible for Christian. It should be
His
Dawan.
dad.
Okay.
Yes.
And at this point, you didn't know it was Christian Ferguson.
No.
Just-
there was no names mentioned. I didn't know any of Monica's kids.
At some point, did you have a conversation with Monica about Christian receiving his medications?
Well, not specific as medications, but we had a conversation because my son is ill as well.
Okay. And what was that conversation about?
Basically, again, that about the back and forth of her not feeling like that was a duty of hers to administer anything or even to care for, his kids, because she felt that, it was being put on her and it was his responsibility. And I explained to her that I had a son that had fatal prone asthma and he was on life support and been through the same thing. So kind of the child needs that.
And did you kind of just relate with her about the difficulties of a special needs child?
Yes.
At some point, was there a conversation between you and Monica where Dawan also became involved?
Yes, it was I and Monica first, and Dawan was outside, and he came in.
So Monica was in your apartment first, and then subsequently Dawan also came in?
Yes.
And before Dawan came in, were you and Monica talking about Christian or the
Yes.
household?
Yes.
And when Dawan came in, what was the conversation like then?
He kind of came in. I asked him, did he want something to drink? And I don't know what he and Monica were talking about, but it was kind of like when I came back in the room, like I knew, and they were looking at each other, and that's when, I was included.
Were they arguing at all?
No, not arguing, just more or less having a conversation that that there was some type of tension.
And was the conversation between the two of them in regards to Christian?
Yes.
At some point, you indicated that you became a part of that conversation.
Yes.
what happened next?
I was so nervous. It was almost, Monica, I remember her saying she knows, or whatever the case may be, that she discussed something with me,
And that was directed to Dawan?
yes.
Okay, so Monica told Dawan, she, referencing you, knows.
Yes.
Okay, what happened next?
Like I said, I went in the kitchen to get something to drink, and they were kind of discussing something between each other. And I really can't remember the details of how it began, but that's when he made a statement of how his stepfather was a powerful man, and basically that the boy was deceased before the date that the call was made, and that the body was buried. Well, the stepfather helped. I don't know if he helped, but the body was put in a foundation of a house that had something to do with the stepfather.
All right, so we're going to take a step back and we're going to kind of walk through this a little bit.
Yeah, because I'm nervous.
Okay, that's okay. So you have a conversation with Monica and Dawan. It starts with Christian. At some point, Dawan makes these statements to you. And he began talking about his stepfather.
Yes.
And what exactly did he say about his stepfather?
That he was a man with a white man with a lot of money, and he held a lot of power. It was almost like he was arrogant, like, that I can get away with anything, and that my stepdad will bail me out.
And then he makes reference to Christian, and correct me if I'm wrong, I thought I heard you say that Christian was deceased before he made the call?
Yes.
And when you talk about call, what is that in referring to?
The call from the payphone saying that he was missing.
And then you made reference a moment ago about how Christian was buried in the foundation of some property
Yes, that had something to do with the stepfather.
that had something to do with the stepfather.
Because he owned, I don't know if he was a landlord or if there were some houses being, constructed, but he had something to do with some houses, and that was,
They never told you the location.
no.
Okay. You just knew it had something to do with foundation, construction, and his stepfather.
Yes.
Ms. Contreras, at any point did Dawan, in this conversation, talk about his ex-wife, Theda?
Yes.
What did he say about her?
I actually didn't know her name because it was never mentioned that her name was never mentioned. It was basically he referenced her in derogatory terms, like everything out of her name, but with her natural born name.
How did you feel after you heard these statements?
Terrified.
And shortly after, well, let me ask you this. Did you ever see Dawan and Monica again after that conversation took place?
No.
Did you go back to working at the Avenue?
No.
After hearing this conversation between Dawan and Monica, did you continue to live in St. Louis?
No.
Did you move out of state?
Yes.
Did you ever call the police about this?
No, I was terrified
And why were you terrified?
because people had just admitted to me a heinous act, basically, and I didn't know what they were capable of. If they were capable of that, I was a single mother with a son, and they knew where I lived, so yeah, I was too scared.
How long after you had heard these statements did you move from St. Louis? Was it days, weeks, months?
It was so long ago, but I'm thinking within the next week or so.
And you have changed your name, correct?
Yes.
Was any of the reason for changing your name in relation to Dawan Ferguson?
Yes.
And did you use other reasons to change your name legally but was that the real reason?
No.
That may have been confusing. What did you use a personal reason to change your name?
I used a personal reason, but that wasn't actually the reason why I changed my name.
And what was the real reason why you changed your name?
Because they knew my name and they had disclosed something to me that I could be found, anywhere. So I wanted to make sure that I got as far away from St. Louis and nobody would know the name Cherie Douglas.
Did you know that Dawan Ferguson was a bounty hunter?
No, I had no clue of his profession or anything. I didn't know anything about him other than speaking to him and what he looked like.
Nothing further.
All right, thank you. Cross-examination.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, Ms. Contreras, you worked at the Avenue at Clock Tower Plaza, was it 2003 or 2004? 2004, okay. And how long did you work at that avenue?
I don't know specifically, but I know it was like 4 months or so.
Okay. And while you worked there, you started working there after Monica did? Like Monica worked there first and you came?
I believe so. When I started, I didn't see her at first, so I'm thinking she was employed before, but we just didn't work the same shift together because I was training.
Okay. And around March of 2004, you moved to Wichita, Kansas with your second husband?
Yes.
Okay. And then you moved back to St. Louis for about a year?
Yes, if that. I don't think a year, though.
And then you moved to Arizona in October of 2008?
Yes. Well, it was more or less August or somewhere like that.
In 2008?
Yeah.
Now, Monica was someone that you worked with, correct? Okay. You had never been to Monica's house?
No.
Okay. And you didn't meet the kids?
No.
Okay. And you testified on direct that you and Monica were friends?
Co-workers or associates. I didn't know Monica like that. I only knew her from working.
Okay. So you didn't know Monica or Dawan well at all?
No.
Right. And you claim that you hung out with them 3 times outside of work?
Yeah.
And
Well, once, and then they came over to my house a couple times to get the clothing from my house.
does that say 3 times? Once not at your house, and then 2 times at your house?
Yes.
Okay. And those were the only times that you hung out with Monica outside of work?
The only times.
And you didn't even know Monica's last name?
No, I did not.
And she didn't have your phone number?
No.
And you had testified on direct that you had a manager at the Avenue named Sonia?
Yes.
Okay. Was it Sonia Willis?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't remember, but yes, that's her name.
Okay. When you were told this confession, did you tell anyone?
No. No.
So you're saying you didn't tell anyone about this confession at
No.
your testimony today?
Not right up front, no.
Okay. But you did eventually tell someone shortly after?
Yes.
Okay. And you told Sonia?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I told her about, there was a sexual harassment situation that went on in line with that as well. So I spoke to her with that. And because those 2 things were working hand in hand, I felt close enough to Sonia to disclose that as well.
Okay. So your testimony here today is that you did tell Sonia that Monica and Dawan confessed to murder to you?
I won't say that I disclosed that much, but I will say that I spoke with Sonia about it. I don't know. I can't remember the details. It was so many years ago.
Okay. Do you remember back on June 9th of 2022 where you were on Zoom for a deposition with me?
Yes.
Okay. And you were sworn under oath, to tell the truth. And I was present, and Mr. Schlesinger was as well?
Yes.
Okay. Judge, I'm going to...
Thank you. You may.
I'm going to show you the deposition here, page 82, that goes into page 83. I'm going to read it and follow along. Can you hear me?
I think you need to speak up or share the microphone.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I asked you, now you told...
Your Honor, I'm just going to object. This is improper. She needs to be able to read it herself first.
All right, that's fine. Yeah, Ms. Steele, if you'll just show her the page and line numbers.
Yeah.
Ms. Steele, why don't you, if you'd like, you can take the copy and at the podium, and then maybe...
I have one here.
Okay. And if you'll just highlight the page and line number, and then read from it, and we'll see if she agrees with that's what it says. Ma'am, do you see the page
Yes.
and line number? All right, could you pull that microphone back closer to you? Okay.
So,
Steele, go ahead.
yes, Just Judge. On page 82, starting at line 19, I said, okay, so you told Sonia and you told Avenue Corporate that 2 people confessed to killing a child to you. Yes. Okay. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, but it is.
Hold on a second, ma'am.
Oh.
It was yes or no?
Oh, yes.
She did read it correctly. All right, you may
Yes.
continue.
Thank you. And then if you go to page 83, line 14, you see that?
Are you saying line 14 on 83, that's the answer? Is the preceding question?
Yes. So we go up to line 10, or I mean, I can read it all the way through 82 down if it makes sense. I just don't want to.
Well, is there something in particular you
Yes.
want to highlight? And what would that be? Is it on line 17 of page 83? Or where are you?
Yes.
Okay.
And so, and again, I
Hold on
just.
one second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right. So, ma'am, do you see that page 83, line 17?
Yes.
Okay, so Ms. Steele's going to read from the deposition, and if you'll just read along and confirm whether that's what it says, okay?
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
And I said, again, I just want to be clear. You told Sonia and Avenue Corporation or Avenue Corporate that Monica and her husband confessed to a murder to you. Well, Dawan did. I mean, Monica, yeah, I don't know what her position was. But yeah. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you read it correctly.
Thank you. You had said on direct about Dawan coming into the store, correct?
Yes.
And that he would bring Monica to work, and then he would sometimes hang out in the store. All right. And,
Is that a yes?
Yes. Oh, sorry.
That's
okay.
fine.
And you said it made you uncomfortable.
Yes.
Okay. And in these 3 conversations that you had with Dawan and Monica, the first one you said was at a bar where you got drinks.
Yeah, but not like we were inebriated. I don't drink like that.
Okay. And this was the talk about adding you to their relationship?
Yeah, like a poly situation.
Okay. And they didn't really talk about Christian in that conversation?
No, not really, not in that first conversation.
And they didn't talk about killing Christian at that first meeting?
No.
Okay. And then the second meeting with the three of them, or the two of them, was at your apartment?
Yes.
And that was a couple of weeks later?
Yes.
And even though they had asked you to consider being in a relationship with them, you hung out with them again?
Well, she came over to my house to get clothing. That's how that is. It
Right,
wasn't
and
to
you-
hang out or anything. She just came to get clothing, and while she was in there, she would talk a little bit.
Okay. So she stayed a little bit.
Yeah, but
Okay.
it wasn't very long.
And you said here today that Dawan said in this confession that the stepfather was a powerful man, boy was dead before date of the phone call. And you would actually, do you remember talking to Ron Goldstein in this investigation?
Yes, that was
Okay.
a couple years ago. But
Yeah.
yes, I do.
And you told Ron Goldstein that Dawan had said that the boy was dead for 2 days before, but in not at least a week.
That was my assumption. I didn't know. That was my assumption.
Again, do you remember the deposition that we had?
Yes.
I'm going to get it. Page 68.
Ms. Steele, does the witness have the whole deposition?
I'm gonna give
Take that to her. Okay, you may approach and give that to her when you're ready. And you said page 68?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Actually, page 67, line 22 down to 25. Read that.
All right. Do you see that, ma'am?
Yes.
All right. So Ms. Steele, let me ask you next question.
I'm going to read it.
That's what I meant, yeah.
So I asked, I'll say the question again. Do you recall telling Ron that it was either a couple of days, less than a week, that he was already dead? And your answer was yes. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would ask for context that she continue reading to line 8 of the next page.
And I would, I don't know if that's an objection, if it is, overrule it. You'll have an opportunity on redirect to visit with the witness again.
And after that conversation, this confession that you say you were told, you never had any interaction with Dawan or Monica again, correct?
No.
And after they told you this alleged confession, Dawan never threatened you,
He had no communication with me.
but he never threatened you after he told you this confession, right?
No.
Okay. Because as you had told me in the depot, if he had threatened you, you would have called the police so fast.
I would have, but like I explained to you in a deposition as well.
No, what I'm asking you is, you had said if Dawan had threatened you, you would have called the police so fast.
Hold on 1 second. Is there a particular part of her deposition she said that?
Yes,
Well, then present it to her and we'll see if that's what it says, okay?
page 30.
And Your Honor, just going forward, I would ask that the witness be allowed to finish her answer rather than being cut off when Ms. Steele doesn't like the answer.
All right, I understand. So let's just move along here. Let's get to page 30, did you say?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, ma'am, you see page 30 in the lines that
Yes, sir.
were pointed out. All right, so Ms. Steele, if you want to go ahead and read that, then ma'am, you will confirm or deny that
Okay.
it says that, okay? All right, go ahead, Ms. Steele.
Thank you. I said, had Dawan ever threatened you when you had encounters with him? No, I would have called the police so fast. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
But you didn't call the police when you're told this confession that they killed a child, correct?
No, I didn't.
Even though you were not threatened, you still chose not to call the police at all.
No, but I was terrified.
You actually have a police officer that's a member of your family, correct?
Yes.
Sergeant Bartlett?
Yes.
And you knew Sergeant Bartlett back in 2004?
I actually did it at the time.
I'm sorry?
My mom wasn't married to his cousin at the time, I don't think.
So your testimony here today is that you didn't know Sergeant Bartlett back in 2004?
I really don't know if I knew him then or not, but yeah, I want to say my mom and his cousin get married, possibly, because they were married then.
So now you're saying you do remember
Yes.
that Sergeant Bartlett was part of your family in 2004?
Yes, but he was somebody that I didn't see every day, somebody that was around me every day, nothing.
Your mom knew him. He was a family member, right? Married into your family?
Yes.
And
my
your mom knew Sergeant Bartlett,
Yes.
and you knew that Sergeant Bartlett knew your family,
Yes.
and you didn't tell Sergeant Bartlett about this confession.
But at that time, my mom didn't even know.
You yourself did not tell Sergeant Bartlett about this confession.
No.
As a matter of fact, you didn't call law enforcement at all about this confession.
No.
You didn't say anything when you moved to Kansas. You didn't call the police in Kansas.
No.
You're far away from here, no fear. You didn't call the police.
No fear, that's not true.
Dawan and Monica did not have your address when you moved to Kansas, correct?
They did not have my address, correct?
So you didn't call the police when you moved to Kansas.
No. And I've lived in fear until the last 2 years. I've been in fear.
You moved to Arizona in 2008.
Yes.
Dawan and Monica did not have your address, correct?
Exactly.
They did not have your phone number,
Exactly.
and you did not call the police.
But I don't know how the legal system is set up like that. I didn't know what to do.
You didn't call the police.
No, I didn't.
Okay. You didn't know what to do when someone confesses murder to you?
What I-
Objection, argumentative and badgering at this point.
Yes.
Overruled, it's cross-examination. Why don't you restate your question?
Someone confessed murder to you of a child, and you didn't know what to do about that?
What I did do was try to reach out to the boy's mom.
But not the police.
No, I didn't know what to do. I've never been in this situation before.
And that was back in 2004 that you were told this confession, right? And you didn't change your name until 2014.
Right. But my last name was changed.
You changed your first and middle name in 2014.
I got married in 2004, so my last name changed.
Your first and middle name change was done in 2014,
Correct.
over 10 years from when you got this alleged confession, correct?
Yes.
Now, you had testified that you had heard about Christian Ferguson on the news, correct? When it happened?
Yeah, I can't quite remember if it's on the news, but I saw it somewhere briefly. I wasn't studying the situation.
And you testified on direct that it was something dealing with the dad using a payphone, is what you saw on the news?
Yes.
Okay. And you reached out to the mother, Theda, on Facebook, correct?
Yes.
And you had,
Well, actually, I didn't.
you reached out to a mutual friend of hers
Yes.
on Facebook. So you and Theta had mutual friends on Facebook.
Yes.
And then after you reached out to Theta, you had a phone conversation with her. Is that correct?
Brief phone conversation, yes.
And that conversation was not recorded.
No.
And there are no other witnesses to that phone conversation besides yourself and Theta, correct?
No.
And you told her in that phone conversation that Dawan had been saying bad things about her.
Yes.
And you told her that Dawan would insult her and say mean things about her.
That's in line with the first question, yes.
And you were talking about a conversation that you said that you had with Dawan maybe 15 years prior.
Yes, but I didn't go into too much because Theta, told me that she was going to put me with somebody to speak with.
And you told her that her son was deceased in that conversation.
Yes.
That had to have been shocking to her. Was it not on the phone?
Yes, but there was no Yes, the conversation lasted but 2 minutes. We weren't on the phone discussing everything that was said to me. I briefly told her a few things, just enough for her to get me in contact with somebody to speak with them because I had looked for her for years before I left St. Louis.
And so when you tell her on the phone that you know that her son is dead, wasn't this an emotional, dramatic conversation?
No, I wouldn't say it was emotional and dramatic. I would say that she held her composure very well. She listened to what I had to say, and she said, you know what, I will have somebody to contact you. And that was the end of our conversation. It was maybe 2 minutes.
And when you told her about Dawan saying bad things about her, did she seem surprised by that?
She never made any comment.
And in that conversation, she tell you bad things about Dawan?
In our conversation, I said more than Miss Theta did.
And in that phone conversation with Theta, you talked about this theory that Dawan had hidden Christian's body in a construction site.
I never said anything about a construction site. I've always said what he said, a foundation of a house.
And Theta told you in this conversation about Dawan's stepdad.
Can you say that again?
In your conversation with Theta, she told you about Dawan's stepfather.
I don't know if that was discussed, but I don't remember. I really don't remember.
And she had Ron Goldstein call you?
Yes, he called. Our conversation lasted about 2 minutes, and within the 5 minutes of us being off the phone, Mr. Goldstein called me.
And when he called you, you gave him this story.
I told him what I knew.
And that's how you became a witness in this trial?
Yes.
Nothing further.
All right, thank you. Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor.
To me. Here's the...
Hi, Ms. Contreras.
Hello.
Ms. Steele was reading portions of your transcript from the deposition. Do you remember her doing that?
Yes.
And at one point I said how it was not being provided in proper context?
Yes.
Because when she asked you about it being a couple days or less than a week that he was already dead, you then continued to say, but I know, like I said, specifically he was dead before the initial call that was made, saying that he was missing. Did Dawan Ferguson tell you a specific set of days, or was that your assumptions?
No, like in the deposition, I said, that was my assumption.
In that conversation with Dawan, did he make statements to you about Christian and his medication?
It was more or less a conversation between me, him, and Monica when they were talking about who should be giving him the medicines, who shouldn't be. It was kind of like that, a back and forth between them.
During that conversation that you overheard between him and Monica, were they discussing about how Christian was not receiving his medications?
Yes.
And when we had talked earlier about the conversations, the things that he was saying about Theta to you, did he make any reference between Theta and her children?
No. Well, I'm nervous. I really don't know how to answer it, but there was really no reference, but I can tell that, I can't remember the exact words. But yeah, she was all type of derogatory terms, and basically because Christian was a special needs child that needed more, attention and more time, that Christian was focused on more because of his need, and Theta's relationship with Christian was closer than the other child.
And did he make any statement about him and Christian as it related to the impact that would have on Theta?
Yes.
What did he say?
Her. Yeah, this would be a way to get back at her.
And you indicated earlier, when Miss Steele was questioning you, you said something to the effect of, my mom didn't even know at that point. Do you remember saying something like that?
Yes.
Did you write any sort of letter to your mother?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell the jury about that?
Because my mom is one of these people that, I couldn't go to her with something like this because she would freak out and she would tell everybody. And I'm from St. Louis. I'm born and raised here. I have to live here. So I didn't know if she told somebody, who else would find out. But what I did was after they confessed to me, I wrote my mom a letter letting her know that before I left Wichita, that if anything happened to me, what they told me and who did it.
And you doing okay?
Yeah.
And Miss Steele questioned you a lot about the delay and was questioning your fear. Now, she asked if he had ever threatened you. Was anything happening during this time period in St. Louis that continued on in Wichita that you in your mind had attributed to Dawan and Monica?
Yes.
Can you please tell the jury?
At the time that, Monica was coming to me about the poly relationship, I started receiving gift bags on my apartment door. I would get home and my neighbor would be like, somebody left something on your door, but I didn't get to see who it was. And when I would open up the bag, it would be like lingerie and sex toys and things like that. And when I left St. Louis and went to Wichita, I was there for a couple months because my husband was in the Navy, a Navy recruiter. And the same thing was happening in Wichita. I would go out to my car and there would be roses and bags and stuff on my car to the point where me and my husband were getting into it.
And did that contribute to the fear you had of the defendant?
Yes.
Miss Steele was making implications with you about you having mutual friends with Theta and was alluding that there was something more. When you reached out to Theta on Facebook, did you just click on her page and see who out of all your friends you might have had in common with?
No, that would be ludicrous because if I clicked on her page, I would be in contact
sorry.
with her. What I did was, the way I knew that, from what I knew, that he was still free, not incarcerated. So I was scrolling down Facebook one day and I saw his picture. I scrolled back up and was like, whoa, I know this face, I know this person. So what I did was, before I left, I tried going to different places that Theta was at, but it was like we would always miss each other. So I didn't want to contact her directly because I didn't want to scare her or have her to think, something negative. So what I did was, I found out I seen people like kind of posting things about, praying for her and things of that nature. So I went to a friend that I knew really good to see if he knew her. And I sent him a message and said, hey, do you know her personally? Because if he just knew her, I wasn't going to say anything. And he said, yeah, I know her personally, and what do you need? And I said, well, could you just send her a message and tell her to contact me?
You had never spoken with her. You did not have any sort of friendship or relationship with her at all prior to
I
that.
didn't even know what she looked like.
No further questions.
All right, thank you, Recross.
Yep. Regarding these gifts that you said you received in Wichita, those gifts didn't have a name on them, correct?
No, but it was the exact same thing with the exact same cards with the exact same handwriting.
There was no name of Monica or Dawan on the
No.
gifts that you received.
No,
And as you had testified, Monica and Dawan, you did not give them your address in Wichita,
no,
and they did not have your address in Arizona.
no.
And about this letter that you said that you wrote your mom, when speaking with Ron Goldstein the first time, you didn't mention anything to him about a letter. Remember that?
Right.
And why didn't you mention that letter to him in the first conversation?
Because it's been so many years and my mom has moved, I had moved, I wanted to make sure that my mom still had the letter.
And in that first conversation with Mr. Goldstein, he had asked you whether you had any written proof of what you were saying, correct?
I mean, that deposition was so long, when I talked to Ms. Goldstein, it was so long ago, I can't confirm or deny, because it was so long ago.
And when you had spoke with him that first time, he specifically mentioned examples like a diary or a letter. Remember him saying that to you?
I mean, it's been so long, it's been like a couple years ago, so I don't quite remember.
So when he asked you to look for something like that, you said you might have something written down because of the sexual harassment thing that was going on.
Again, the way that you're answering the question, I don't quite remember, the conversation going like that, but it could have been possible.
Okay. And you're saying that you wrote this letter in 2004.
Yes.
And you claim that your mother found this envelope and a letter somewhere in her house.
No, I handed it to my mom, and I told her not to open it up if something happened to me, you open this letter up and you read it.
That's what I'm saying. Your mom has been holding on to this letter in an envelope for over 15 years.
Yes.
Okay. And is the house in St. Louis?
Yeah, my mom hasn't lived anywhere but St. Louis.
So you had your mom, who lives in St. Louis, send the letter to you in Arizona?
I
And-
actually came and got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you emailed it to Ron
Yeah.
instead of giving him the actual letter?
At that time, I wasn't really, we had just known each other, so I wasn't really in contact with like that, but I think I came like on a one-day visit flight here for a death or something, and I got it from my mom, and I didn't have time to give it to him, so I just told him that I would send it to him once I got back.
So you didn't open this envelope in front of the police or Ron at all?
No,
And you didn't give this envelope to Ron or the police at all?
no,
You just sent him a copy of a letter
yes,
that you claimed was in a sealed envelope?
it wasn't a sealed envelope.
Nothing further.
Thank you. All right, witness may be released, Ms. Schlesinger.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, ma'am, you may step down. Thank you. All right, do the state have any other evidence or witnesses?
Your Honor, may we approach?
You may.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Schlesinger, other than working with counsel and the court to go over to make sure, the exhibits you wanted admitted have been admitted, does the state have any other evidence?
No, Your Honor. At this time, the state rests.
All right, thank you. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do is now is we're going to take a break, our lunch break. It is 11:17. I'm going to get this out of the way because I messed up yesterday. I didn't tell you what time to come in today, so I'm aware of that. So I'm going to have you all come back at 12:30. Well, I'm sorry, make it 12:45 just to be safe. Give you a little extra time for lunch. So 12:45. We'll go from there. And so at this time, court again reminds you what you were told at the first recess. Don't discuss this case among yourselves or with others. Don't permit anyone to discuss it in your hearing. Don't form or express any opinion about the case until it's finally given to you to decide. Don't do any research or investigation on your own about any matter regarding this case or anyone involved with the trial. Do not communicate with others by any means about the case, and do not read, view, or listen to any newspaper, radio, electronic communications from the internet, or television report of the trial. And I just want to reiterate that the state is rested. We still have work to do here, so do not, make any decisions about this case, form any opinions, or talk to anyone, okay? So enjoy lunch. We'll see you back in the jury deliberation room at 12:45, and I'll do my best to get you right out, okay? Thank you.
All right.